But we can talk about this storage later. You know, Park home and needed way too much work to save, which they never wanted to do, but they did want the big lot. And they still paid $4.5 million for the old house, tore it down to get this lot, which they need because a big lot, that is. Because when that's finished, it's going to be Winter Park's one of Florida's largest homes. So that's going to be 41,000 square feet when they finish that. And it sits on the road we're about to go under in this next canal. It's called Palmer Avenue. So I mentioned we're going to be on 3 different lakes. We obviously use canals to go from one to the other. These lakes are natural. The canals that join them were originally just little streams. In the 1870s, we'll get into history later, but that was before they started Winter Park. They started cutting down the pine trees around the lakes, and the lumberjacks that cut them down also hand dug the canals. And they did that to float the trees to a sawmill. And the sawmill used to be actually close to where Rollins is, which if we had gone to regular time, we would have gone first. Today it's the end, at least on this trip. Anyway, this is the Venetian Canal. It's by far the longest. It kind of looks like the lumberjacks that dug it. Had a few cocktails before they did. This doesn't go straight. The statue on the right faces north. We call that southern exposure, Lake Osceola. That one over as good as by Tom Cruise. The house on the left, this white one, that was another James Gamble Rogers home. So he built that in the 40s, but folks that bought it 3 years ago spent pretty much 3 years adding to it, renovating it, but still keeping the same basic feel of the house. So people are actually pretty happy with what they've done here, I think. At least everybody I talked to.
What kind of style did you use?
I'm sorry?
What kind of style did you use?
A lot of Mediterranean, colonial, Victorian, that one Bermuda style, lots of different styles. I got some new bananas right here. Yeah, he bananas. Yeah, you got it, buddy. Yeah, watch your heads at the bridge, guys. No, you're asking about James Gamble Rogers and the styles. Although, Mediterranean, colonial, kind of a New England feel. The whole town is really.
Yeah.
But that's one of the cool things about Winter Park too. It's not just his stuff, but just the town in general is full of such diverse architecture, really.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny.
Like New England and Florida, yeah. So I mentioned this is Palmer Avenue. There's a road right up here to our right that runs down to the next lake called Alabama Drive. And also just such a good town to drive around, and Alabama is one of the favorites. But I also mention it because I'm going to show you a building on it that was the third winter hotel built on these lakes, called the Alabama Hotel. So hang on one second, let me just talk to this guy. Okay folks, got one more behind me, then you're good. Thank you guys. Let me get by her.
That's what you can get. You can do it from her.
All right folks, just got one more coming guys, then you're good.
This lecture will be very fun to pass.
It is a fun place to do. Yeah. I was talking about our winter hotels. I mentioned the Alabama was the third. The first 2 were built on Lake Osceola, so when we go back over there, I'll talk about those. But these were all very famous hotels open when it was cold up north, about 5 months every winter. And that's why it's called Winter Park, because it was established to be a winter community for wealthy folks. Back in those early years. But anyway, the Alabama Hotel, like the first 2, was really popular. They built it 100 years ago. And after running its course, instead of tearing it down, they turned it into condominiums. That's why the building's still here. It's been the Alabama condos for 40 years now. another couple little tidbits I mentioned. So, you know, as a winter community, it was Winter Park's also the first planned community in the state of Florida because they platted the whole area when they started this. They did, you know, kind of initially just develop 600 acres on the shores of these lakes for homes, but they also platted the whole town. And I also kind of going backwards on the history here, but I mentioned, I think I did, that the first winter hotel was built in 1886. Rollins College actually started just the year before that, so Rollins has always been a big part of Winter Park's story. And we'll talk about Rollins a lot later.
That would be my favorite part.
Yeah.
And how safe would you say the water is?
How safe for swimming?
Yeah.
I've been swimming it since 50 years. Guys, got one more comment. Don't go anywhere. Thank you. I think it's great. Every once in a while, they never used to do this, but about 30 years ago, they started warning about amoeba when the water got hot. And I think I was talking to the girl that controls the lakes. I used to be on the lakes down here for years. And she was even agreeing that it's kind of a little overblown. But they just for liability safety. One more comment, guys. Yes, sir. So I've been swimming in the lakes since I moved here 50 years ago. This is Lake Maitland. It's the largest lake on the chain. This is about 450 acres. If you look straight ahead, right in the middle of it, there's a little island. It's called Dog Island. It's a favorite place to boat here. Big building to our right is Rollins College's crew boat house. Rollins is not on this lake, but the one it's on is half as big, so this is much better for crew.
Oh yeah, that's where they do the cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
That's where you probably
Yeah,
end
that's where I'm
end
gonna
up
have to
doing
go.
it. Yeah.
It's gonna be like I'm gonna have to run here.
Are you going to be able to cruise?
Yeah.
You got a jog?
Yeah, I got that jog here.
So they rent our, I don't know if you're, about maybe 10, 12 years ago, they started renting motor boats to go behind the pitches and race.
Oh, really?
So they're a seat of it. You know, racing all the way to the other side of the lake, all the way to the other side.
Look at this.
That little girl is, she just fell, but she is good. It's Winter Park. We got a bunch of parks. This is one of the favorites to our right called Craft Azalea Gardens, full of 1,000-year-old cypress, but also in the park right there where the folks are, we have that little, hang on guys, I can get over this wake. Give me a second, I'm a little nervous here. Wee!
Woo! Wee! Woo! Oh my god.
Whoa, that's your excitement for the time.
For the day, right?
Let's do that. Yeah.
I know, I was going to finish the story. I was telling you that little 6-column concrete structure back there, it's called an exodrop, which in Greek means 6-column concrete structure. But it's used primarily for taking pictures, which y'all might want to do, but I don't know if I mentioned, it's also a lot of small ones. I mentioned the old Alabama Hotel. Still, you can see the roof of it, and a little bit of the building too. It's the building behind the boats in the corner. The homes that sit to the left of it, they're on a road that you might want to drive on too. It's great. It's called Via Tuscany. Runs right into Alabama. And the folks that live in the Tuscan home with the great boathouse actually bought their next door neighbor's house about 8 months ago and tore it down to build, well, actually just create a bigger lawn for their kids to play on. So that house was, I mentioned the road's called Via Tuscany, and the house was modeled after a house in Tuscany. So that is called Villa Toscana, built that in 1927, but it's not the oldest house back here. It is one of the favorites though. The house to the left of it is the oldest, which is 110 years old. The folks that built that owned this whole cove, which was their orange grove. At the time, it was the largest grove in the lakes. 2 doors to the left of it, the house with all those columns architecturally looks like it could be pretty old. That one's 10 years old. So I mean, it really is such a good blend of old and new and different styles. And they like tennis. That's their clay tennis court fenced in. This all glass house in front of us. That's pretty new. They built that about 2 years ago. And they didn't want a boathouse in the water. It would have blocked their view. Look to the right of it. That's their boat garage with a track that takes their boat out.
But that's about the only thing to do with
Yeah.
We love
just talking about old and new homes here. There's a little bit of both. The original house is the left side where the pineapple windows start, and that part's 100 years old. It's actually modeled after a house in Venice. And for its first 60 years, there wasn't a little lawn there, so the water went right into the lake like Venice. They didn't eventually put the lawn in, but 10 years ago they put the right side on, and 7 years ago they also bought their neighbor's house to the right, which looks like this one now. And they tore that down to build what's now their pool house over there. And the original house, the left side of this, was made a little bit more famous in Winter Park 26 years ago. Tom Hanks used it to represent a scientist on a movie called From the Earth to the Moon. Little canal to the right looks like it goes to a different lake, but doesn't. That's also Lake Maitland on the other side. What you see to the left of that canal is an island. That was land that was too low to build homes on, though, until the 1920s. So they sandbagged the perimeter and backfilled it, made a 12-acre island today 11 homes sit on, and definitely some of the more expensive land in Winter Park. It's called the Isle of Sicily. Got a couple electric foil boards over there, and then there's that little girl wake surfing too. But anyway, right off the shore of the Isle of Sicily, that little cypress has all those Christmas ornaments. One of our former drivers, Charlie West, and his family are the ones that originally decorated that. And 27 years ago they did it, but they never took ornaments down. They just came out every Christmas to replace the ones that got blown off until Charlie passed away. One of the guy, that was 9 years ago. So anyway, the last 9 Christmases, myself and a couple other drivers decorate, kind of an excuse for cocktails and a boat ride. Building a new house on that peninsula. There's 2 empty lots where they'll be building soon on North Park Avenue. Now, the modern home behind the cypress trees in front of us, move to the right a little bit, you can see the spiral staircase that goes to the roof. They built that 30 years ago, but it got a lot of press when they did for a couple reasons. It was the largest house on the chain of lakes back then, not anymore. But it also started off with a basketball court inside of it because it was originally one of the Magic players. So that started off as Horace Grants, who designed so much stuff for a tall guy, mid-to-left countertops, light switches, everything. And it's had 2 owners since Horace. The one he sold it to was really short, and he lowered everything and made the basketball court a ballroom. And the new owners have put everything on the roof, which was always flat. They put the 2 spiral staircases to get up there too, because they put a rooftop bar and lounge on top of the house. Classic White House to the left of it, another James Gamble Rogers home, the architect I mentioned, who it's the oldest house back here. He built that one for some folks in the middle of the Depression that weren't depressed. And probably the most famous owners were the Packards from Packard Cars. You know, these cypresses is kind of unusual. The cypress, I think I mentioned they're called bald cypress because they lose their foliage. If I didn't, they do. But you can see a little bit of orange, which is really early in the season. They don't usually lose their foliage. They do change color actually too, but that usually doesn't happen until February or March. So, you know, all the foliage will fall off. All this stuff that hangs from the trees, that's called Spanish moss. And guess what? It's not Spanish and it's not moss. It's an air plant. Technically, it's called an epiphyte. And they did use it for a lot of things in the early 1900s. Stuffed mattresses with it. Found out pretty quickly it's full of bugs. So that's where the expression "don't let the bed bugs bite" first started. And you can see, like this live oak above us, pretty much every live oak you see on their horizontal branches that has this type of fern. And today it's really green. About a week ago, it was brown because we had gone about 4 days without much rain a week ago. And it turns brown when it doesn't rain for about 4 days. But as soon as it rains, it turns green. And that's why it's called resurrection fern. It comes back to life.
Now you see you can sell real estate here.
I don't know if you can tell this, but this water is flowing directly towards me, or because all this water goes north. Hang on 1 second. Guys, after me, one more boat, and then you're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was mentioning how the water flows north. It actually, eventually, all this water winds up in the Atlantic Ocean up in Jacksonville, by way of the St. Johns River. So we're actually in St. Johns Water Management right now. And you might know this, it's one of the few rivers in the world that flows north, St. Johns. See a lot of that resurrection fern here. Well, this is an indication that we're waiting for somebody. Laceborn, bad Saturday was not crowded out here today. It's pretty well crowded. Well, listen, while we're waiting, my buddy here who's going, we're not really buddies, we just met each other, but he is attending Rollins. And I mentioned James Gamble Rogers. He wanted to know if that was a relative of Fred Rogers. I probably because, for those who don't know this, Fred Rogers is basically the favorite graduate of Rollins College. So I know my Rollins friend was just saying how we always do something. All right. Anyway, when we get on the next lake, I'm actually going to show you a house that his parents owned while he was in Rollins. His degree was in music. He got it in 1951. Actually, his first year of college, his freshman year, he went to Dartmouth and just didn't like it that much. Hang on 1 second, let me cut these guys. Close out. One more boat after me, guys. You're good to go. I don't think that we're losing. Anyway, back to Fred Rogers. I think I mentioned he went to Dartmouth as a freshman. He transferred to Rollins sophomore year. What he did, he brought his piano with him, which he left in his dorm room. Rollins wouldn't let him do it, so his parents bought the house. I'm going to show you a little bit later on this next lake, and put the piano inside there. So you'll see.
Is that where you lived as well?
No, not really. I know I'm old, but I used to play, hang out with some guys that went to school with him. So older than me, they're father figures, but he lived on campus. Actually, his sister went to Rollins after he did too, but his parents kept the house even when his sister was there, because it really was a house more for them, when they came to visit. So, Fred actually met his wife at Rollins. I don't know if you'll have him. He has a nephew that teaches music there, Dr. Crozier. over at Rollins, yeah.
Oh, here, see?
But anyway, you'll see the beautiful neighborhood he was talking about when you see his house.
Can't blame him for staying.
No, he would come down pretty often. But as you know, they do a lot of stuff. You have to live there. Speaking of that, we were just talking about honoring Fred. They did put a $750,000 statue of Fred. It's Fred surrounded by children and some of his characters. Put it next to the chapel at Rollins about 2.5 years ago. It took 2 years to make too.
Didn't realize it was that.
Yeah, it's very recent.
I didn't realize the lakes are so deep.
Yeah, the Red Brick House with all the ivy. That one was Fred Rogers' parents. I mentioned the first of those, or actually the first two winter hotels in this town were on this lake, and the first one was the most famous. It sat all the way across the lake where that house with the dormers sits. It was called the Seminole Hotel, and I think I told you they built that in 1886, year after they started Rollins. And the Seminole at the time was the largest hotel in the entire state of Florida. It had a lot of the modern conveniences of that era, so it was considered to be one of the best hotels in the United States back then. And attracted very famous folks, including U.S. presidents, until it burned down in 1902. So it's only here 16 years, but really made this famous place. And then 10 years after it burned down is when they built the second of the three winter hotels right over here to the right. That little boathouse gazebo is, I think, left, so it's 110 years old. And they spent a lot of time on the one that was over here. They called it the New Seminole Hotel. And it had a pretty good run. It was here a little over 50 years, and they tore it down to build the homes over here in the 60s. Always like that little two-door boathouse, which was built about 40 years ago. But the house that it belongs to, they actually built 130 years ago. So it's one of the few original homes on these lakes. It's a Georgia Revival style home, and the gentleman that had that built was from Portland, New York, but would live here in the winter. And I mentioned how this was a winter community. His wife didn't want to live in Florida. It was kind of a wilderness back then. So to get her here, he actually built a replica of her Portland home. We went up to homes over there. And really wound up liking it. Small town back then, and that's a big house with a ballroom. So a lot of the social events of Winter Park were held right there. mentioned that this is kind of the area where the Seminole Hotel was built, the first one. Today, there are a lot of sculptings over here in the yellow house because this is a sculptor's museum over here today. This is it's called the Alvin Placic Museum, and 200 of his works sit over here. And he was well renowned as a sculptor. He retired to Winter Park in 1950. Lived in that yellow house back there with his wife. And when he passed, she left the house and gardens as a shrine in the museum to him. So a great museum, obviously a pretty place, and they hold a lot of events there. In my opinion, most important one they ever had was my daughter's wedding,
Yeah.
which I'm still paying for. No, I'm not. No, as a matter of fact, it was 11 years, well, actually 11 and a half years ago. And when she got married on the lawn right over there, the gray and white house right here is on the museum's property today, but it wasn't there when she got married because that's the one I told you they cut in half and floated across the lake
Oh.
the year after she got married. That would be the Cape House. This canal is called the Fern Canal. So lots of ferns. There's a lot of bamboo in this one. Some of the bigger bamboo you see when they enter the canal on the right side.
How do they keep the bamboo in check?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. My Florida buddy here was saying bamboo can be very invasive, so
Yeah.
it can kind of take over, but not every species of bamboo. So there's some of it less than others, but they'll just keep cutting it back if it's part of the more invasive species. Yeah, but this big stuff really doesn't spread as much as some of the other stuff.
Uh-oh.
Come on. Let's keep coming.
Kayakers.
Well, they're going to have to wait for us at the bridge. We'll let this guy by. They were just getting in. Kayakers, yeah.
How long it will take to kayak through all of this? The whole day. How about that?
Kayak to the park.
See a lot of resurrection fern and Spanish moss in this canal. Also, this is where alligators jump. We didn't talk about gators, did we?
No,
I'll talk about it in a second.
just thinking about that.
Anyway, this is where I have y'all stand up and introduce yourself. Don't stand up here. Watch your heads. Seriously, legs came up about 5 or 6 inches last night. So it's a little tight. Definitely be careful. You might have to duck a little bit. And we would love tops on these boats, especially during these hot, rainy months. Obviously, we can't have tops because of the bridges and trees here. Anyway, I mentioned gators. We used to have a bunch. So I've lived right off this next lake 50 years. Used to see them all the time. And about 30 years ago, after folks kept complaining about them, the city removed them and relocated them and put them in a lake this water runs to on the St. John's, 12 miles north, called Jessup. And today, Lake Jessup has more gators per square foot than any place in the United States because everybody puts them there.
If you want to see gators, just go there.
That's a good place to see them. And actually, the fish camp, Black Hammock, has airboat rides for gators.
There was some in the lake next to Rollins.
I'm going to tell you, you're absolutely right. So the truth is, my Rollins buddy here, yes. So I even saw on Facebook a picture of a couple gators about 3 weeks ago. So every once in a while, a gator will creep in these lakes. They call the city, and the city, somebody calls the city, and they call them frequently. So yes, but you're right, they do creep. Anyway, wow, early for rain. There's rain south of us. Anyway, this is Lake Virginia. One of the first settlers here was from that state, named it after it. A little bigger than Osceola. I mentioned, all this water goes to the Atlantic by way of St. John's, but there's 6 lakes that are connected by canals, and then a bunch by streams in the St. John's River too. I also mentioned the Fred Rogers statue by the chapel at Rollins. The chapel itself is probably my favorite building in Winter Park, one of only 2 on the National Historic Register. I mentioned it here because you can see the stamp. And it's called the Knowles Chapel. And Knowles was a founding father of Winter Park who gave the money for the first building at Rollins. And then his daughters went there and later gave the money to build it. And hired the best architect in the world at that time for chapel building, Ralph Adams Cram. And it should be open. They're in session. I don't know about Labor Day, but give it a shot for sure. Looking down to the left, there's a smaller lake called Lake Moselle. And my house would be just to the right. No, it's not mine. But that's one of mine. It's no doubt. You wouldn't be driving this boat, trust me, if you'd watch the U.S. Open, drinking beer or something. But anyway, this does have some history to it, at least the original building, which is the middle part, because that part is 100 years old. They put the right and left side on 10 years ago. And the original building was a businessman's club, and it only lasted 2 years. And then a Rollins professor named Dr. Martin wanted to make it into his house, but he eventually gave it to Rollins, who used it as their music conservatory, which is what it was, called it Martin Hall. And then Rollins sold it in '76, and it's been a house ever since. That house and the next 3 past it, all 4 of them sit on Lake Moselle and Lake Virginia. So these guys get a sunrise on Moselle, sunset over here. Talked about how pricey land can be, and this is not developed because it's a 50-acre preserve in 3 lakes called the Genius Preserve. Unfortunately, it's not open to the public. Nobody lives in the house on it either, but the folks that used to are the ones that gave the land and for the preserve. And they actually had 220 acres where they lived there, so they developed 170 of that after they passed. It's a neighborhood called Lindsay, and those are those. And when they had all the land and lived in the house, that family did let the public on the dirt road go through their property, right around Lake Moselle, basically. It's called Genius Drive. And Genius Drive is pretty much what you call it, Park for a long time. And it was also full of peacocks, and they still have some, but that's also why the peacock is a symbol of the park. That's what's living over here. Friends at Rollins, this is really 3 generations of this, the same family. We talked about the Morse family, that was the Morse family. So Morse bought it for about $2 an acre. They wound up getting about $3 million an acre for some of these lots when they developed it. So.
Wow.
And all the money did go into the Morse Foundation, which controls a lot of things in Winter Park. So Rollins will be to our right. That's where we're headed.
Michael, where's your door?
Oh yeah, I have a lake sign here.
It's yours is the rain.
No, I didn't have a rowing program in there, but I believe I can do it. Yeah, it'll be fun.
It is fun, and they have novice, they have all kinds of, they kind of make it Rollins campus does start on that road right in front of us and then goes almost back to where we came into Lake Virginia. They got about 80 acres sitting on this lake. And the school was started in 1885. I think I mentioned that, but it is the first private college in Florida. And today, a lot of folks really feel it's the best liberal arts school in the South. I'm sure you do. Yeah, matter of fact, U.S. News and World Report did rank it that way about 6 months ago. I've never seen that. When they started, there were 60 students, cost $100 a year. Sorry to my Rollins mom right here. I know, yeah, a little pricier than that. Today, with room and board, it's actually over 70 grand a year, about 73. I know it. My friend's a freshman right there. Okay. Sorry, Mom. Today they've got about 2,000 undergrads, but they also have an MBA program. They have a night school. They've got some graduate courses. And even when you add it all together, it's only about 10 students for every professor. So, you know, excellent education, just pretty. Princeton Review ranked it the prettiest campus in the U.S. in 2015. So to me, walking through it and quiet because of the holiday weekend, but I think it's just one of those things to do in town for sure. Rollins buddy was just mentioned, these are called lakeside. Everything's been built in a Mediterranean style since the 1920s, but they just built these about 5 years ago. Still Mediterranean. They replaced old dorm buildings that held about 200 kids in little rooms. These are suites overlooking the lake and hold 500 students. So they are trying to create a little more campus life here. But that is their ski jump. I'm surprised they haven't put it in the water, but they probably will next week. But, so they don't jump on land, although that'd be kind of fun to watch. But should we put it back in the water?
So they got the boats.
Building on the point behind the gazebo is the third museum of Winter Park, owned by the school and full of fine art. Guess what it's called? The Rollins Fine Arts Museum, appropriately. But up until about 2 years ago, that was a Cornell museum. They gave the money for it. They did change the name of that, but there's still a lot of Cornell and Alphont buildings.
Yeah, I was going to say there's Cornell.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of money. So that was the Alphont Boathouse. Big building's Alphont Gym. Just last week, they started tearing down the Alphont tennis courts to build more dorms over here.
It's right in front of
and
the
then,
door.
yeah, so if you look behind that, across the street, you can see the top of the Alphont Inn. Another gift from the Alphonts, but not on campus. That one's across the street from the campus where a hotel called the Langton used to be. And they built the Alphont 10 years ago, but it's already considered to be one of Florida's best hotels. And all the money it makes goes to scholarships for Rollins students. But the main reason I mentioned it, since I was talking about museums, that one has $12 million worth of artwork and it's treated like the fourth Winter Park Museum. So definitely can stop at that.
Oh, yeah. It's free.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can't beat the price.
Oh, that's fun.
Unless you're staying. Now, I mentioned how the train that goes through town came through in 1880. In 1889, a couple local guys thought there should also be a commuter train to get down to Orlando, because there weren't any cars back then, and mostly students, but also locals just were riding their horses back and forth. So they built this little teeny narrow gauge railroad, and the station sat right where that beach sits today, and then just went down to Orlando, 6 miles, and it was called the Winter Park Orlando Railroad. But nobody called it that. The train was so small, they nicknamed it the Dinky Line, and that's why the beach is a park called Dinky Dock. Named after the station. It used to sit right there. So y'all could go to Dinky Dock. The train ran for 78 years here. A lot of fun stuff written about it, so you could Google some of this. It jumped the tracks a lot. You had to jump off and help the engineer pick it up and put it back on. Now the building to the right of Dinky Dock with all these palms, that was an apartment complex. Rollins bought it, made a dorm out of that 17 years ago. And then the house to the right of it is the president's house for Rollins.
Nice.
Actually, both he and his wife squeeze in that 9,000 square foot house. They are so well liked here. Unfortunately,
They
Rollins'
retired.
buddy, this is his
Yeah.
last year. So, yeah, but and he will be missed for sure. That's also the last Rollins building, by the way, on the water. So everything to the right of it's private homes. So got to catch up to our boats the other way. Now I got to wait for them. Looks like it's pretty crowded, so we should have one more boat after this guy.